All right, welcome back to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lighting straight on your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Oh, well, I've got counter wokecraft up there and cynical theories because we're talking wokey stuff. You got a video that you want me to react to, and it's about literature and how it sucks now. And apparently, it has a lot of stuff that I've been exposed to, and I'm gonna break it down for you in real time. And I'll do
I,
the
I
best I can because we've been passing viruses around here in
yeah,
my hometown, and it's my turn.
I found this girl a couple of months ago, and I want to say it was because I had watched some Wheel of Time videos, and I think she did a breakdown of why the Prime series sucked. Like a brief breakdown, but more in general, talking about why modern fantasy sucks. And and so I was like, well, you know what? She's interesting. So I watched a few more of her before subscribing, and then I checked out her website. So where she comes from is from a classical literature background. Okay, she's mostly self-taught, but she's very well read. She writes her own material. She writes her own fantasy, and then she critiques. And uh she was the whole point of this particular video really was her digging into some studies that show how uh, literacy is being taught
Mm,
and why that makes modern writers terrible. Modern writers are terrible because modern readers are terrible because we're not taught how to read.
mm.
So, and I've seen some people talking about this recently about how the last several years of incoming college students don't read. And in fact, if you tell them to read an entire book, they're like, "Huh?" It's like it's alien to them. Just the idea that you would sit down and read a whole book is somehow alien to them because they're not taught that and they're not expected in way too many schools. And she has numbers and she breaks down, but then she comes across something that you can tell is weird to her, as she says, is this term critical literacy. Well, she assumed that meant
Critical thinking.
critical thinking,
Yeah.
looking at literature with a critical eye, which is I had we've talked about Mr. Galki, our wonderful recently passed physics and calculus teacher. In fact, he came up the other day when I was driving my daughter home from school as I was talking about him. I was fortunate to have a wonderful honors English teacher, ninth grade year, Mr. Manette. That was the entire class. Is he would give us sections of classical literature. Like I think the first one we started with was a section of Emerson's On Walden Pond. And we had to analyze it. What are the allusions? What is he trying to say? How is he saying it? And then we had to write a one page, and it had to be one page. If you went one sentence over onto a second page, you failed the assignment because he wanted us to practice being concise.
Hmm.
And that is how I got to be able to read and write so well is all from Mr. Manette and that foundation.
Which is
They
funny
have no
because
foundation
yeah,
today.
we do class presentations and we had midterm presentations and we're working on our final presentations. And one of the requirements was under 15 minutes. And the amount of presentations in that class that went over 15 minutes was almost all of them. And I'm like, that's the minimum requirement. That's not even the research you have to do. That's not even the speaking you have to do. Just have it under this time.
Mm-hmm.
But people ramble and they're doing I'm like, go in there and edit it. It's a partner thing. So me and my partner did ours and we were like 15 minutes and 50 seconds after recording. I just went in and edited out the ums and the uhs. And it was under 15 minutes. It was that simple, and we looked like better speakers. It's great. But let's get to, for my part, let's define critical theories first of all. So for those that are new to the channel, yeah, we've talked about this before, but this is something that I got really into during the COVID times because I all of a sudden had time on my hands and I wanted to make sense of what the stupid shit was going on. And I had to deal with all the Colin Kaepernick stuff in my job. And so I started reading D'Angelo Kendi, Ta-Nehisi Coates, all as Lowry would call them, the three named peoples, and because they all seem to go by all three names. But critical theory is not critical thinking.
Hmm.
Critical theory is derived from what they call the critical consciousness, which, if you have the critical consciousness, you can see all the oppressive things that are going on in society. It's where we get terms like microaggressions. You can see the racism going on, or put the ism, whatever ism you want on it, the ageism, the ableism, whatever it is, because we have the intersectionality of oppression, and everybody's trying to win the oppression Olympics, right? So if you have a critical consciousness, you're aware to all this stuff. That's why we call it woke,
Hmm.
because they used to proudly say they were woke to all
They they
the
were awake.
underlying
They
things.
were
Yeah.
aware of the fact,
Hmm.
to them, fact that America was still systemically racist
So
and systemically oppressive.
when Kaepernick was saying he's kneeling because of racism, he wasn't talking about acts of racism, which is what the other side was fighting.
Hmm.
And that's why everybody was talking past each other. And so but he was talking about, no, this underlying layer of society, which you would have to destroy society to get rid of. It's
Hmm.
like having stage 4 cancer, right? It's all through the lymph nodes and your organs and everything all at once. So you got to hit it with the chemo. You can't just go in and cut it out. Where what everybody arguing with him was talking about was acts of racism. Like, okay, so maybe George Floyd was an act of racism. We're putting intent on it, but let's say maybe that was. Well, Chauvin went to trial and he went to jail. Done. Close the book. No, but no, it's because this underlying thing is there that we have to always be fighting and aware.
Yeah.
And if you had this critical consciousness, you would know too. Which basically you're teaching people a belief system, and when you
So
have a belief system, you see it.
that is a good tease for next time, because something I teased previously that I wanted to talk about and we won't have time today, because you're dying, is what is happening on the right, especially when it comes to anti-Semitism. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of talking past each other that's driving me crazy. Is okay, yeah, you're making a good point about you're making a good point, but does that point necessarily apply to the person you're talking about? Is that what that person is actually saying? No. There is a lot of talking past each other, which is where I think Lindsay was right when he talked about the woke right is another element of that has seeped into the online discourse all over the place, is this idea of, and this is pertinent to what we're talking about here, uh, this idea that we have entirely different world views, entirely different ways of seeing the world. The
Hmm.
reason we have been harping on stories so much lately, and the reason we continue to overanalyze Wheel of Time, is because stories matter. And look at the buzzword of politics now, the narrative.
Hmm.
It's not even being hidden anymore. Now, it was always true. This idea that Walter Cronkite, well, sure, he was on the left, he was a liberal Democrat, but he was speaking the news. No, he wasn't. He had a narrative every bit as much as they do today. They just presented it in a more factual way. Now they're not even pretending. They are straight out using the word. There was a clip I saw of Colbert being interviewed by some lefty podcaster, basically saying, my job is to tell you what to think about the news, because you're busy. You're busy. You know about the news, but you don't do a deep dive because you've got a job and you've got kids, and that's my job. My job is to do a deep dive on the news and then tell you what to think about it.
Hmm.
It's not even being hidden anymore. And so let's get into the video, because this is where this comes from, and this is, talk about systemic. This is how this has seeped in, because it starts at the grade school level.
All right, I think I'm in the right spot.
The description. When I first heard the term critical literacy, I was foolish enough to assume that it meant literacy that involved the ability to think critically and to
Uh-huh.
analyze the meaning of the text by one's own power. Turns out, I was wrong. Critical literacy is defined as learning to read and write as part of the process of becoming conscious of one's experience as historically constructed within specific power relations.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is exactly what we just talked about. Okay,
This is this is where I was watching it with, uh-oh, I know those words. I have
yeah.
heard Sam use those words.
So what they're talking about here in what the authors of that definition were talking about was your experience is based on where you sit in those power relations.
Hmm.
So if, say, you are a black female trans black trans female, your position in those power relations are going to determine how you feel life is. And so it will also determine how you how receptive you are to the literature you're reading.
Yeah. And look, the other thing that jumps out at me the second time through here is something that bears repeating because when we first started talking about intersectionality and critical theory, you pointed out the roots of this stuff, that this stuff goes way back, but it was just a seed, a small seed hiding in academia. And then it's like bamboo. You water it and you water it and you water it and you water it and pretty much nothing happens, or it just sprouts and it just grows ever so slowly until it hits a point of I can't remember what it's called, but it hits a certain point and then it just explodes, and all of a sudden it grows feet a week.
Yeah, and not only does it explode and grow feet a week, that root system that forms from it, if anybody's ever cleared bamboo, which I
Ugh.
had to do at this house when we moved in, you have to get every little bit of it's like carpet under the ground,
Hmm.
and you have to get every little bit out or it comes right back.
Yep.
But what's happening is those roots are growing during that time where it seems like nothing's growing. And
Exactly.
it is
And so
you have to yeah, go
look
ahead.
at the dates from the texts that are being cited here: 1982, 1993, 1998, 2000. Okay. So the most recent one is 25 years ago. That is how ingrained and embedded this stuff is. And this comes from something that is proudly declaring itself as promoting and proactive in critical literacy, and their definition, rooted in the socio-cultural perspectives of reading. Critical literacy used learn has used learning to, quote, build access to literate practices and discourse resources. What a bunch of academic gobbledygook. That is, what is it Gad said about something so stupid only an academic could think of it?
Yeah, yeah. Ideas so stupid, only academics could come up with it. Yeah, it's from Parasitic Mind from Gad said. Yeah. All right, let's go further. Let's see what she's got. Yeah.
Critical literacy moves the reader's focus away from the self in critical reading to the interpretation of texts in different environmental and cultural contexts.
Perfect.
Hello, Mark Barden
Oh,
here
oh,
from
Oh,
Sandy Hook
add,
you
Farms.
already
add,
played an
add.
ad. Quiet
On
you.
December 14th, 2000.
Further, critical literacy provides opportunities for readers to determine their ability to discern the purpose of texts and also their ability to identify ideologies presented in the texts. As they read, individuals can accept, reject, or reconstruct the ideologies presented in the text to support their own life experiences. We're
Okay,
not
pause right
Which,
there.
well, yeah, we do that sometimes
Exactly.
to some degree. That as we talk about with Wheel of Time, uh, I I have a different experience with the book than you do, so they are
Hmm.
correct in that, right? But at the same time, there's an underlying thing with all the power dynamics and everything. So yeah, it's
And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about that kind of jumped out at me. As I've said, um, one of the things that I think Peterson and Haidt have been so invaluable about for anyone interested in uh, bridging the nonsense and having actual adult conversations. So the latest trigonometry video was them just talking about their most recent recordings, some of which they've released, some of which they haven't, which have been with some pretty divisive people. Uh, they talked to Dave Smith. They talked to Ben Shapiro. They talked to Hassan Piker, who has been in the news for electrocuting his dog. So I hope we never meet him because you would have words with him.
Yeah, yeah. For those that can't see, my mug says,
Mhm,
"Sorry, I'm late. I saw a dog."
exactly.
Yeah.
And and basically their intro was, my gosh, wasn't that fun sitting down having conversations like adults, like we, and their point was because they're around our age, I think, and part of their point was this is what journalism used to be. This is what debate used to be. Um, I after I watched their interview with Dinesh D'Souza, which was awesome, it sent me down a rabbit hole, and I went back and I'd only watched clips before, but he did a series of debates with Hitchens, with Christopher Hitchens, who was an avowed, proud, vocal atheist,
Hmm.
and but respected D'Souza's intellect and his position and him as a person, and so was more than happy to, yeah, let's go to Notre Dame and let's have a back and forth, let's have a debate. And no, we're not going to change either one of our minds, but it's worth putting these ideas out there. And so back to where I started, Peterson and Haidt, one of the things that they did that was so valuable to me is you need people who think differently. You know, so this is especially true with Haidt's work. Is, well, Haidt showed the how left-leaning and right-leaning people think differently, and Peterson has done a lot of talking about why and what that means,
Hmm.
but also why it's important that you have both. And so even with something like critical theory or postmodernism, there is a kernel of truth to it. And it is useful to see that, especially if you want to try and engage with someone who is stuck in this mire and in this way of thinking, to say, okay, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's true. That's Heraclides and his river.
Hmm.
But the river still exists. The river is still there. The river is still something that is objective. How you interact with it changes, but the river is still the river.
Hmm. Well, and it flows and it affects the banks and it changes in that way, but it's still made of hydrogen, eh, two
Mm-hmm.
hydrogens and an oxygen, plus the other things that are floating in there, including yourself, right? So yeah, there are objective things about the river. Just even though the water itself is slightly different every time you get in, the temperature changes, the banks change, it's still water.
So
And
when
yeah.
you read a piece of literature, or when you hear a debate, or when you hear a lecture or a presentation, yeah, how you're going to react to it, how you're going to interpret it, how it's going to affect you is going to be different than how it affects me. And again, even back to Heraclides and back to our discussions on Wheel of Time. And then when you come back to it at a later point in your life, it's going to affect you differently, most likely,
Hmm.
because of how you have changed through your life. There is a kernel of truth to that. But what the author is saying is still what the author is saying.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, let's go on a little bit more.
I'm not going to dig into this yet, but I want you to keep these definitions in mind as we proceed. Critical literacy, as it is called, and as I have just defined, is the new literacy. Begun in spirit by Paulo Freire, and then more solidly presented by Ira Shore in his 1980 book, Critical Teaching in Everyday Life, critical literacy aims to teach not literacy, but rather a kind of social awareness, which was using teaching reading as a delivery method of sorts, as if reading was just the syringe and this right kind of social awareness was the real thing they wanted the child to receive. Let me show you one quote from this book that should pretty adequately illustrate critical literacy in action. Prior to scheduling classes, Freirean educators study the life and language of their prospective students. These sociological inquiries permit them to discover a small number of keywords from daily life called generative words, which will be used for both problematizing experience and for literacy teaching. The generative words like brick, rice, slum, or wealth suggest social themes around which consciousness can then be raised.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is key, and this is why the book behind me is called Cynical Theories instead of Critical Theories, because that key word here is problematizing, right? They,
That's some good academia right there.
yeah, well, and that's the whole point of being critically conscious is to find the things that are problematic in
Hmm.
the environment, which go figure, there are always going to be problems, right? So you can
Hmm.
always find things to problematize. No matter how equitable we make things, there will be people that fall behind. So we can always find problems. If we fix racial issues, well, there's going to be people with health issues that are, with weight issues, with uh, age. Age is going to be the big one. I mean, I'm in this aging class, and it's absolutely correct that we need to be focusing on this because that population is growing exponentially because we live longer and we're not having kids. So proportionally, we're going to be an old society here soon, a very old society. And enter things like COVID. What was most, the worst thing to be when COVID came is old.
I continue to go back to the stat that to me was the most profound and telling that should have been you know, the big blinking light to us of, oh, here's how we need to deal with this, which is what freaked out the West is when it hit Italy,
Hmm.
because now we could see it. Now it wasn't behind the just what we knew coming out of China was leaks because they were still nothing to see here. Everything is fine. Cue the Naked Gun meme of Leslie Nielsen in front of the exploding fireworks factory. But then when it hit Italy, well, now you have Western media who has full access to this, and you have a Western government that is telling you what's going on. And so the illness and the death rate there was staggering. But there was one stat that that was so telling and so tragic, which was 90% of the fatalities were people who were 80 or older. Because it like us, like what we're becoming, Italy was a very demographically old population.
I'm wanting to say they were the most demographically old population.
In the EU, I believe that was correct
Yeah,
at the time. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, but then say we solved that. Okay, so we solved race, we solved age. Well, then it's going to be people with disabilities. Okay, we
Mm-hmm.
solved that with modern technology. Okay, then it's going to be socioeconomic class. Okay, then we solved that. Then it's always going to be something.
Pretty flip privilege. How do you cure pretty privilege?
Yeah,
That is a
height.
thing.
It'll be guys below 5'9", right? It'll
Yeah.
be, something like that, which we actually have that. You want to be the most discriminated against person in the United States right now? Be on a dating app and be below 6 foot as a dude.
Mm-hmm.
You're already checked off the box before your picture even shows up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, height and pretty are the most privileged things you can be. Are we going to solve for that? Are we going to start punching people in the nose so they look uglier? What are we going to do about all these? So yeah, this is the problem with this whole mindset is there will always be something.
The reason I so often bring up Marxism and the roots of socialism when we talk about these things is because the fundamental flaw and socialist Marxist ideology is somewhere at the core of all of these ideologies, sometimes more blatant than at other times, but somewhere it is at the core of that. And the reason I always bring that up is because its fundamental flaw is it's utopian. In the
Mhm.
in the same way that I criticize anarcho-capitalism is because its fundamental flaw is it's utopian. Utopianism never works. It can't because we are a world populated with people.
Well, even if it wasn't people, it wouldn't be perfect because it would be just, I mean, look at nature, man. Nature is metal. That's one of my favorite, websites to follow on like Instagram because it's all the things that, you know what, you're pretty privileged just to be in your house with your air conditioner because
Yeah.
you see that gazelle get its, leg ripped off by the Komodo dragon, that kind of stuff. It is like, yeah, there will always be something. And it's not just nature. It's just, I mean, it's not just humans. It's just nature in general. I
Yeah.
mean, even when we were amoebas, the bigger amoeba would out overpower the smaller amoeba. So, all right, we're gonna go on.
A little bit more, yeah.
The concept of critical literacy then infected the education world. Within 2 decades, it had been adopted by the US government as an aspect of ESL programs. By the 90s, it had quickly but completely become the new literacy. I have a couple quotes from Shore's book and the list of links on my website. If you're curious as to just how disturbing this is, have a read. When people in modern academic and education circles talk about literate kids or teaching literacy, this critical literacy is, to them, the ultimate sign of success. If they can produce a critically literate adult, then they've done their job. Before we get too deep into the effects of critical
Does she does she go into how that's measured?
I don't
How,
remember, but she because
how do you
again,
determine if somebody has a critical
yeah,
literacy? That's
again, the main point of this, we're just looking at this section on critical literacy, but her main point is how this idea infected, and this was part of my point of pointing out the dates in that definition, because I'm a political nerd, so I've been paying attention to these things and I remember, but back in the 90s, you saw the effects of this, and we didn't understand the roots of it because the
mm,
effect of this, and she goes into this in more detail, either at the beginning of the video or after this section, where, um, interestingly, she had a very similar experience that I had with my son, which is her father ended up homeschooling her because her elementary school was so bad, and by like the second grade she couldn't read, and it was in large part because starting in the 90s, we remember, because we used to make fun of it, hooked on phonics worked for me.
yeah.
And I mean, you can still go in and you find the meme of those things spelled wrong. That's partly because English is weird and has so many exceptions because we're an amalgam of a bunch of different Western and Northern European languages. But for the most part, phonics was the way you were taught to read. Here is what this letter is, here is how it sounds, here is it in a sentence. At some point in the 90s, phonics started to go away. And people were like, wait, why are we doing this? And they brought in these newer systems. And again, that was the effect. What we didn't see, the people who were complaining about that and saying, why are you doing this? Well, it was because they were bringing in a new system that was based on critical literacy,
Mm.
not on actual literacy.
And well, and we see the effects of it because look at that chart, the Chicago schools, where they did the reading levels of basically every school in Chicago was failing on that. And this is partly, so we'll get into a little bit of cog psych. One of the things about being human is we have language, right? We have that is probably one of the biggest leaps for humanity over the rest of nature. Now, other animals do have kind of a little bit of language, like we see it with dolphins and whales, and they can communicate, but we actually have a very sophisticated language. But it's not just words. It is a process. It is a formation of sounds that turn into a thought that means something. And so that's why phonics works better than sight words because you're just memorizing a thing that looks like something versus actually creating the sounds and making sense of them through a process.
When we
And you,
were in elementary school
yeah,
and we came across a word we didn't know, we were told sound it out
mm-hmm. Sound it
because
out.
that's how it works. That's how you learn. So again, back to my rant about my great grandma and her one room schoolhouse is she was able to educate people who went on to, you know, do highly technical things in World War II and in their life and be successful bankers and all these other. She didn't teach these things, but she did teach them how to think so that
Mhm.
when they encountered something new, it wasn't paralysis that we get nowadays of I don't know how to do. Let me ask Gemini.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We've harped on this. This has basically been one of the themes of the last month and a half or 2 months of this show is schema.
Mm,
Language is a schema, right? So if it's not just like again, picture a house. You can close your eyes and it's going to have things, we're all going to have things in common that with what we do. It's going to have four walls. If it's a 2D image, it's going to have four walls. It's going to have a roof. It's going to have a window. It's going to have a door. Door is part of house. Window is part of house. Walls are part of house. Roof is part of house. It's not, we don't just say the same picture. Boom. So in language, the sound the e the I just made those different sounds in a row all come together to mean something. And if you don't learn it that way, you won't learn it properly because that's not how our brain works.
mhm.
Just like everything we input, we're taking in the wavelengths of light to make colors. We're taking in the wavelengths of sound to make, and then it goes through your eardrum, and the further it goes, the deeper it is. It's all of these things aren't just the thing. They are representations of what makes the thing. This is why McGilchrist's work is so good because the title of his book, The Matter with Things, right? Yeah, it is actually the matter with things all coming together to create something.
And I was just about to bring that up because one of the great sections in that McGilchrist and what's his name, Besant, that we played some
Desmet,
clips,
Desmet,
Desmet,
yeah.
and we talked about is Desmet made the great point about language that not only do all of our words have nuance, multiple meanings, the way you combine them can change things. So, this word may mean one thing by itself, but then you combine it in this way, and now it suddenly implies something else. But on top of that, you have all the nonverbals.
Hmm.
And
The exformation, yeah.
what critical literacy is doing is destroying all of that. It's saying none of that matters. What matters is what you project onto the text or onto what the speaker is saying based on your fifis.
Hmm.
You
Well,
cannot.
not only that, I'm going to take it a step further. Based on your feelings, but also based on what we're telling you about your feelings.
Mm,
If you are this, you should feel this because that is where you stand in society. And again, I'll just stick with we'll make it not racial. I'll just say age. Okay, so based on your age, this is how you should feel about what you're reading. This is what you should be thinking because this is what society does to you. And this is and so it is a form of control. It's a form of population control at the end of the day, which is what they need because the whole point of all this is social engineering. If it was about how you feel as an individual, they would have no control.
exactly. And that is it may seem like so there's a thought that is worth exploring because on the surface, critical theory would seem like the ultimate individualism because it's all about your lived experience. It's all about your consciousness. It's all about your perception of whatever, but it's not. That again, that is just on the surface because then when you drill down, as you say, how you are supposed to feel, how you are assumed to feel is based on a number of check boxes based on the power oppressed dynamic.
Hmm.
So it's not actually individualism. It seems like it. I think that may be one of the reasons it is so appealing, especially to young people, is because, oh yeah, I want people to get me.
Hmm.
A channel I've brought up before, Greg Owen, did a great deep dive on a movie I knew was crap because I'd seen other people talking about it, but he actually now that it's out on streaming or whatever, he watched it and did a deep dive on the American Society of Magical Negroes. And
What?
have you not heard about this movie?
I've not heard about this movie.
All right, let's
That just made my head hurt.
let's pause for a second so I can get
Okay,
a coffee refill.
sounds good. Here we go.
All right, so I can't believe you didn't see this because this was making the rounds because it was so awful. Um, and in a lot of the right-ish leaning, not really right, but just non-woke culture critics talked about it when it came out. And uh Nerdrotic, when he talked about it, he got Eric July, who is Repaverse, who has made his own comic brand now, and he's a big black guy from Dallas. I've met him. He's a really nice guy, and so he got him to say the title because he's like, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this. Eric, help me out. And so whenever he would play the title, he had a clip of Eric July saying, "The American Society of Magical Negroes." And it's kind
That
of
reminds me of the if anybody's seen the comedy bit where the white guy is arguing with the black guy, so he hired another black guy to say the word that he couldn't say in the argument.
no,
So
I haven't seen
he's
that.
like give me the money, and the other guy would say the word, and you can't do this, and he's like, oh, I hired him to do this.
Uh,
And so-
uh, another. It's funny that this came up here because a couple weeks ago I brought up way back in 2007 the LA Times opinion piece about Barack the Magic Negro
yes, and
because
yeah,
there is this
do
trope.
you know how much I was sweating that day?
Yep.
Gosh.
But if you want to a laugh, Key and Peele did a hilarious sketch on the trope
Mm.
where like two magic Negroes show up and they're fighting over who gets to be the wise old black mentor to this white guy. And actual like it's like this mashup of Harry Potter and Airplane, or it's hilarious. And it was something a lot of people brought up of, if this movie would have been that would have been hilarious. But instead, it's this. And play it real quick. And even if you're just listening, it's only going to take 15 or 20 seconds before you go, oh, I see what this movie's all about.
Oh, let me make sure I shared with sound. Okay, I did. All right.
I know you can feel their discomfort, Aaron. Watching you walk through a room full of white people was the most painful thing I've ever seen.
Excuse me. Sorry.
I don't want to take you to a job interview. There's a room.
Maybe, just maybe, and this is part of Greg Owen's point. Maybe that's because you're a scrawny, dorky, awkward introvert, and that's why you're so uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I think to keep it with the point of what we've been talking about, that's the problem with the critical theories, is not that it's other things. It's that if you're taught that's why you're feeling that
Exactly.
way, you're going to feel that way. We had this in one of the presidential debates in 2020 was they framed that question, well, so and such group has to give the talk to their kid about this or whatever. And say you're that kid, you're 16-year-olds, you're impressionable, your parents are trying to give you a talk. We all have that talk with our kids. If you get pulled over, hands on the wheel, be respectful, we'll take care of it later. You just yes sir, no no sir, no ma'am, whatever, and you get through that traffic stop and we'll take care of it in the end if you weren't at fault. We all have that talk.
Mm-hmm.
But if you add a component to it that is skin color, that person's going to feel like they are getting treated that way. Because cops can be, I'm sorry, cops can be jerks, which is understandable because their job sucks sometimes.
I thought about your rant having, I didn't watch it. Kudos to you for watching it. Kaepernick's documentary on
Hmm.
himself that was on Netflix and the way he threw his white adopted parents under the bus.
Hmm.
Um, these guys did that. And it reminded me of something I had forgotten about because I haven't watched him in a while, just because I don't have enough time to watch all the things I used to watch of Jason Whitlock, um, big black guy, former uh, college offensive lineman, and then became a sports reporter and columnist. He's been on both ESPN and Fox, and he has his own YouTube show called Fearless now. And when he was talking about this stuff early on, he used the phrase African Americans, half African American.
Hmm.
That he was making the point that so many of the most vocal and radical adopters of CRT, DEI, Black Lives Matter, why is it that so many of them are half black? And they
Hmm.
seem to be the most bitter. And they also they don't come from the hood. You know, he grew up in the rough part of Indianapolis. Okay, so he grew up with the quote unquote authentic black experience. And he's not like this. You know, he respects people for people. He respects your opinion based on the merits of your opinion. Both of these guys, Greg Owen in his video on this plays interview clips of, and I hadn't seen him before, the writer and I believe director of this movie is also half black. And so is that actor that you just
Hmm.
saw, which I was disappointed seeing him open his mouth and talk about this nonsense because I liked him in the D&D movie with
Yeah,
with Christopher
that was a
Plummer.
hilarious movie. That
He
was
he, he and as Greg Owen points out, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's basically a half black version of this other scrawny, dorky kid who's got one of those faces that you'd see and has you know played the pathetic nerd in a lot of teen comedies and rom-coms and this guy, this actor, he fits that role great and he can play it well. And in fact, Owen talks about how once you get away from the racial nonsense and actually get to the core plot of the movie, which is kind of a rom-com thing, it, it's actually decent. But then they keep bringing in this CRT nonsense. And when you listen to
well,
these two people
that's one of
talk,
the tenets. Oh, hold on, let me.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Keep talking while I get
So, and when you
D'Angelo
listen to
here.
these people talk, you realize why it is shoehorned in and why it is nonsense. Because both of these guys grew up with white mothers in comfortable suburban America, but then they were told by outsiders, no, no, this is how you're supposed to think. This is what really is happening in America. So they were shoved into, again, back to the veneer is individualism, but it's not really, because they were shoved into this box and told, no, no, you don't actually fit into America because America is inherently racist. So you don't fit into the white world and you don't fit into the black world because the white world only sees you as black, not half black.
Yeah, and so I'm going to read directly from this is Sensoy and D'Angelo. Are we even equal? This is one of the core textbooks for the critical consciousness, and this is being taught in universities. This is one of the first things you do in a humanities degree or social sciences degree, sciences in air quotes here. Yeah. The definition we apply is rooted in critical theoretical approach. Again, not critical thinking, critical theoretical approach. While this approach refers to a broad range of fields, there are some important shared principles. These are stated as facts. You have to accept these as facts. All people are individuals, but they are also members of social groups. That's number one. These social groups are valued unequally in society. That's number two, which we've talked about already today. Social groups that are valued more highly have greater access to the resources of the society. Social injustice is real, exists today, and results in unequal access to resources between groups of people. Again, you have to take these as facts. These are not debatable. Those who claim for the social justice, those who claim to be for social justice must be engaged in self-reflection about their own socialization into these groups and must strategically act from that awareness in ways that challenge social injustice. And then the last one is this action requires a commitment to an ongoing and lifelong process. That's the important one here because they had to put that in that movie because that they have to be an activist their entire life for social injustice. And you pick your pet project. This one happens to be race that you just brought forward. But say I'm getting older, say it was age. I have a heart condition, say it's ableism. You know, you pick your project and you have to be fighting for it, right?
Mhm.
So, based on these principles, a person engaged in critical social justice practice must be able to, and this is the four pillars of critical social justice, recognize that relations of unequal social power are constantly being enacted at both the micro, individual, and macro structural levels. Number two, understand our own positions within these relations of unequal power. So we have to, this is by definition, we have to understand that we're white, cisgender, heterosexual males. So we are in a position of power and we have to help those that aren't. Okay. Think critically about knowledge, what we know and how we know it. So this is where the writing comes in and the reading comes in. How we know it, epistemology, right? How we learn things, how we know things, and what I know about the world is based on my position as a white cisgender heterosexual male, right? That's different than how Hamilton knows the world as a dog, right? So, right? But no, that was joking aside. It's different than how my wife knows the world as a female white cisgender heterosexual, right? So she obviously knows the world differently than I do, and somehow she makes more money than I do, even though I'm the oppressor. But point aside, right? Okay, so then the last one is act on all of the above in service of a more socially just society. So if you are a writer and you are trained in this way, you have to write in a way that is acting on your position and the social injustices that are happening in society.
And you're not allowed to say, but is any of that true? Because then you're just
Oh yeah, no, they
demonstrating
tell you
your
where the
oppression.
injustices are. That's
Yeah.
the second half of the book. Here's
That
where it is. And when you check their data, you talked about dates.
mhm.
One thing that kept coming up during the uh, since Trayvon Martin really, but really was coming up during COVID was you would hear people say, "We all know," and if I heard those words, I that was the initial red flag. One of them is, "We all know women make 70% of what men do in the same job." Well, no, we don't. Those
Mm,
numbers are from 1990.
mm.
We're talking about dates, right? Yeah, in 1990, women made 70%, 70 cents on the dollar. But that's not true anymore. In
Well,
fact,
it wasn't
they
true.
make like 1.2 over
eh,
men now.
That's
And it's
also the macro number. I've mentioned this before, but back
yeah,
in
if you take
79 or
Elon Musk out
80,
of it, it changes the
back in
equation.
79 or 80, I don't remember which book because he's published like 100 frickin' books. Thomas Sowell, greatest academic of America. You know, guy's 90 and he's still publishing books. Um, you can go find the firing line Thomas Sowell. It's because it's PBS, it's available online. You can find the whole episode, and he goes into the numbers for how even back then he debunked the pay gap, the wage gap.
Hmm.
He debunked it by saying, no, you can't just look at the macro, you got to look at the micro, and here's why. And that is why Thomas Sowell is the black face of white supremacy.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things about it, just for those that don't know the argument, men work more overtime.
Hmm.
And if you take the overtime out of it, it already went to even.
Men
And
are much more likely to work a dangerous job. Dangerous
mhm.
jobs pay more because they're dangerous.
Yeah. So and also now that we're in a laptop generation, that was before the laptop generation.
Hmm.
You know, now that we have so many laptop jobs that I mean, it's equitable, which is great. I love it. I love that we can all work and basically make a living, even though they say we can't make a living wage. You know, we can all work because jobs aren't as dangerous. You don't have to be physically strong. That I'm okay with that. Although AI is going to change all that here soon, uh, but quit bringing the argument up then. Like I said, it's always going to be something. You're always problematizing something. So you're playing with statistics to, but the one I was going to bring up because you did bring up that trailer, which was the racial one. We all know that 1 in 3 black men will be incarcerated. That one I was like, that sounds like a lot. That's a lot. That's a big number. I looked it up. It actually in one of the arguments with the guy that would always jump on Jack Whith's
Mm.
things, Dr. Johnson. He would doctor in philosophy,
Yeah.
by the way, but he would always jump on. He would send me articles to prove his point. And I was just reading through one, and I was looking the thing. If you ever read research, which I have to do all the time, I've got 3 papers I got to go over right after we're done with this. Look at the dates of the sources. And they're right there. They're in the pages you're going through it by APA formatting. It has the author and date if you cite it. And the dates were all over the place. It was like 2017, 2022, 20, you know, and one of them was 2003. And that was the number 1 in 3. And I'm like, this paper is written in 2018. Why do we have a source on incarceration rates from 2003? Well, I looked it up. I went back to the original Department of Justice paper that it was. It's because that was the year that incarceration rates jumped a little bit. They've been falling since 1980 consistently. It was like 10% to 1.3%. They've been falling big since then. There was one year it bumped just a little bit. And I was like, interesting. So he took the rate of that jump in that paper and made an assumption, which mathematical models do, that it would continue. And the second part of it was did not account for repeat offenders. So if every incarceration was a new person, those were the two big assumptions that led to that number. And guess what? The next year, they fell again. So they didn't continue at that pace. And oh my gosh, the average offender gets arrested 5.5 times in their lifetime. That number goes from 1 in 3 to almost non-existent because realistically, almost nobody gets arrested. We're all pretty good people. We don't commit crimes. We just go about our day.
In the Western democratized world, anyway. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that number was used and is still being used for this social justice campaign because it was in the Department of Justice paper. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh, well, I mean, this is so easy to, I mean, I know statistics. I've done all of this stuff and I'm in school, but I'm not like Charles Murray statistic level. You know, I would have to relearn some of it if I wrote a paper right now because it's just but it was that easy. It was that easy.
Again, back to teasing the woke right and how this kind of thinking has infected all across the spectrum in our public discourse. Another Murray, Douglas Murray, when he was on with Rogan, he was on Rogan with Dave Smith, and
Mhm.
Konstantin
That
Kisin
wasn't
had,
his best moment, by the way. It
it,
just
it wasn't his best moment, but it was understandable in much the same way that we say Malone is the better advocate for what we've been talking about than McCullough because McCullough was attacked so viciously personally that he started to take it personal. Um, but Kissen made the point in his response to that of people are screaming at Douglas Murray saying he's advocating cancel culture, and basically so there's a great snarky quote from the late William F. Buckley, who is kind of the founder of the modern conservative movement and founded the conservative magazine National Review. And he said, it's not that our liberal friends are wrong. It's just that they know so much that isn't true.
Mm,
And you can apply that to a lot of people these days because that's basically what Douglas Murray was saying. He was saying to Dave Smith, the reason he said, have you even been there? Is because Douglas Murray has been there repeatedly. He has seen with his
hmm
own eyes what's going on, he has heard with his own ears from a variety of sources and people. And so when he speaks, he can speak with authority. Whether you agree with him or not is not the point. The point he was making is, Smith, you are speaking authoritatively about something which you know nothing,
mm,
or at least very little. Your sources are all, to your point, like that warped source. Your sources are all this bubble here, and you have never gone outside that bubble. You've just said, well, we all know. You're
hmm
using the same language of the critical theorists of, well, we all know that this is this. And Douglas Murray's point was, bullcrap. You
Yeah.
haven't critically thought. You are essentially using critical theory. You're not using critical thinking.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, I've been to many beer gardens in Germany. It's not like Beer Fest, or what was that movie? Uh,
Wasn't that what it was?
yeah, I
Was,
think it was called Beer
was
Fest. Yeah.
yeah, the Broken Lizard
Yeah.
movie.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are truths there. There are some things about it that were the same, but it's not that. But it's like you got your information from Beer Fest or Euro Trip or one of those movies, and you're like, it is this. It's like, no, no, no. It's kind of something different. I love the beer gardens in Germany.
Hmm.
It's such a chill environment. But no, okay, so I'm gonna steel man the critical theorists for a second here to end us, I think. Not end us totally, but end us for today. Yeah. They are correct in that there are social injustices in societies, right? So if you move here from a different country, you're going to be in a deficit when it comes to integrating into culture and you know just having to make a living. If you are disabled, you're going to have a deficit. I'll say one for myself, which no don't throw any pity parties because I'm glad I you know didn't get blown up in a war or something, but I could not join the military coming out of high school because of my heart condition, right? That set me back.
Hmm.
That set me back because that was my plan. That was how I was going to pay for college. That was how I was going to make a living. Uh, but you adapt, but it exists. So they are right. These things exist, right? If you are a young black man in an inner city, it's going to be a little more difficult if you go to like my suburb here, right? Because people will automatically think that you're the black man from the inner city. They are correct about that, but you can overcome it. That's what
Hmm.
they're not correct about. And if you come into the community and you contribute to the community, everybody's going to be fine. You know, if you are a woman, yes, you will get pregnant if you want to have children, and that will affect your career. They're correct about that. They're correct about all of those things. What they're incorrect about is that there's this structural thing everybody has to be aware of, and you should be sensitive to it, and it will affect everything in your life. Because, say, you're a woman, you decide not to have a child. Well, your career is going to be just fine. If you are a woman and you decide to have a child and you have a job with great maternity leave, you're going to be just fine. But say you do it early and then you focus on your career, you're going to be just fine. That's all of these things can be true at the same time, and they do not have that nuance. They say you are this, you are this, you are this, therefore you should see the world this way. So steel manning it, they are correct in the individual things. But as the video you brought up shows, they're not concerned about the individual, they're concerned about the social group, which is where the control comes in.
So for next time, Wheel of Time, I want to stay kind of on this idea and why it matters and talk. I want to do a deep dive on a character we have talked about, and I want to talk about in more detail, and that is Nynaeve,
Mm,
because this is a character we did not like when we first started reading these books. As we got older, we began to understand her more. As we got even older, we began to appreciate her more.
hmm
And
You,
then,
you kind of even wanted her in your life, kind of
yeah,
as a reader. You're like, oh, I could have used that when I was Rand's age. You know,
exactly.
yeah.
And so, because the point is, the words on the page never changed. The objective fact of who she was, the story Robert Jordan was trying to tell with this character, that didn't change. But no, it is true that our perception of it changed. Our reaction to it changed. That's a good thing.
hmm Well, I mean, I talked about this. Who was it? Dave Tate, strength coach. He was a strength coach, famous strength. I think it was Tate, famous strength coach. It was or Wendler. One of those two. He said, "Hey, I read 1 hour of fiction, 1 hour of nonfiction a day." And he said, "And I reread a book 10 years later because I'm a different person." And that was what got me to reread The Wheel of Time before we did this stuff. And I was like, wow, it is so much different.
Hmm.
Again, there's truth in the critical theories. We are different. But again, we're still walking in the water. We're still getting in the river. It is still a river. So there's truths, but there's also objective reality. And we have to live with both.
Exactly.
We have to live with both.
All right. Well, hopefully that helped someone with something. If nothing else, gave you some food for thought. And we will see you all next time.
All right. Later.